everyone. My name is Dan, and I'm joined by
Scott.
And we're here today in this happy little studio because we're talking about PaintBrush.js, a JavaScript library that you can use in your website, WordPress website, what have you. It's created by Dave Shea. Dave Shea, known as the person behind it's a little older now, right?
Yeah.
But CSS Zen Garden, which is basically like an open source project that allowed people to contribute their own design ideas and their own kind of CSS styles into existing content on their website, correct?
Yep. Yeah, and it had to be the same content. You're just manipulating the style of the site. So
that's super cool. This is available in the GitHub repository. So if you want to download it there, you can do that as well. And it provides extensive detailed information about how to install it, which is really nice too.
Yeah,
provided by the developer and the creator, Dave Shea. Cool. Anything we want to kind of say at the beginning, sort of introducing this thing?
Well, it's lightweight. It's supposed to be. That's what they say. Yeah. No, it is lightweight. It's a browser-based image processing library. So you're actually applying a bunch of different filters in the browser. Yeah. This is going to be a new technique that we'll see moving forward as more browsers start to support more CSS3 properties. And basically, it'll go and it'll work in pretty much every browser except good old
IE.
Good old IE8.
IE8. So IE9, the kind of up-and-coming Internet Explorer, this will work in to some degree. And I believe he's still working out the kinks working on it, but no other Internet Explorer browser will support this.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a bummer. I mean, it's sort of expected these days at this point. It is sort of a bummer considering the amount of users who are going to be visiting a website or developing or doing whatever on Internet Explorer, you know?
Yeah, the good thing is, though, it's actually taken a back seat towards in usage, and Chrome is really getting up there. Chrome, Firefox, and Safari.
For Windows users, fantastic.
Yeah, so.
Fantastic. So why don't I kind of go through a little kind of short list of some of the some of the image tools provided for this. It reminds me as more of a designer than you as more of a web developer as sort of Photoshop-y sort of layer effects.
It really
so we're going to go over a couple here. We have ones such as blur or Gaussian blur, which is just your typical blur. And in this one, you can define how much of a blur you want. We have your emboss, which sort of gives it that rocky profile to everything. That sort of every little edge is sort of kind of 3D in a way and sort of enhanced there. Yeah. And you can, of course, define how much of an emboss you're giving your product or your image. Grayscale, of course, is your black and white or desaturated look to your saturated look, and you can adjust that level to sort of be more saturated or more desaturated. Mosaic is sort of I call it your 8-bit or your pixelated look at your image. You can decide how big the pixels are as well as, so your pixel density as well as how much of a mosaic blur there is compared to the normal image clarity. There's posterize, which gives you your Andy Warhol-like look, sort of that bloomy, sort of like kind of, I don't know, ugly, I didn't say ugly effect, but that very, very color bloomy effect to your images. And then, of course, there's color tint, which actually uses you select a web HTML color via the code, and then you can apply amount of tint to it, either filling up the entire screen with the color or sort of putting that overlay of a color on the screen.
So we have a lot of features and enhancements we can add.
And there's actually more than that. Those are just some of the ones I figured would be a little more useful to people out there kind of designing on their website and putting images on there. One thing we did talk about a little bit before filming here is the way that the attributes are defined.
Yeah.
In the code.
Yep.
And from what I gather, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, from what I gather, the way it works is there are default attributes. So for example, by default, just by setting up the blur, for the Gaussian blur effect, you get a 0.25 level or a 25% blur effect.
Yeah, so out of the box, there's default set. Right. So you don't have to go in and adjust any of the settings if you like the defaults. Right. But the functionality is there to be able to edit the defaults and set your own values. So in that case, I'll talk a little bit about the usage now going on that point.
Go for it.
To apply a specific filter to an element, all you need to do is add the class. And they provide you with the classes in the documentation. Dave does.
Dave.
And basically, if you just apply that class, it's going to take on the defaults.
Okay.
If you then want to go in and set some HTML5 data attributes, they tell you about those as well in the documentation. You can, and you'll be able to apply either more of a Gaussian blur, let's say, or less, more of a desaturation effect, or full-on grayscale, or just a little bit of a desaturation.
And you would just set the number value or the value from like a 0.25 to like a 0.5 or whatever you want to do.
Yeah,
between 0 and 1.
Yeah, usually 0 and 1. And the documentation is very extensive, as Dan said. All the examples are in there, and all of the different attributes that you can change are there as well. So.
Cool.
Pretty neat stuff.
Cool. So there's that. Any sort of additional sort of implementation into the WordPress sort of aspect of this? Let's talk about that, because WordPress is really something that people are really jumping into these days, because it's super easy to use. Anybody can jump in and do that. And as a sort of a first-time web developer, that can be sort of your ticket into a nice website. Definitely. And now you're going to sort of code on the side. So let's talk a little bit about how that would be implemented, if you could.
Yeah, definitely. So in order to implement this into your WordPress install, this is a little more advanced than, let's say, just playing around with different styles on a theme. Sure. You need to have knowledge of FTP, as well as WordPress functionality and WordPress functions, and some PHP knowledge is preferred as well. So it does get pretty advanced, but it's not that bad once you get a grasp of everything. Right. So in my research, I found out that this plugin relies on 2 scripts, actually. One of them is a common file, and this file contains functions that are outside of the PaintBrush.js license, which is the MIT license, by the way. Oh, wow. And basically, those functions are either created or he adapted onto those functions by other authors. So he can't necessarily include them in the actual library under the MIT license, because those authors
are other authors.
Owners. But the Paintbrush library script itself is actually the Paintbrush library, and that is the MIT license. And you can feel free to use that, modify it according to the MIT license specs. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is upload both of the files to your theme folder. Now, this is where the FTP knowledge comes into play, File Transfer Protocol. There is not a WordPress plugin yet for this, but I imagine he may build one, or maybe someone will in the future.
Which would be super cool.
And then you wouldn't need to upload it, but you want to upload it into the current themes folder. Usually what we like to do is create a JavaScript folder. And we'll just place these 2 scripts, the common and the Paintbrush, right into that
Simply
folder.
to make it more convenient for sort of access later.
Yes, definitely. So then once they're uploaded, we want to talk about the functions.php file. So your theme should come with a functions.php file. Most of them do nowadays. If it doesn't, you'll have to create it. So again, this is more kind of FTP knowledge. WordPress does have a built-in theme editor, but we suggest you use your own standalone editor, whether it be Sublime or Dreamweaver, something like that. Anyway, inside of the functions.php file, you're going to want to create a function, and we're going to need to add an action that will both register the script and then enqueue it. So I'll talk a little bit about the functions file really quick. So it's basically one way to change or modify the default behaviors of WordPress and or the current theme that you have selected. Basically, it allows you to hook into WordPress hooks and filters, and you're able to modify content based on those the functions that you create. So the first one I want to talk about is actually registering a script. So we're going to create a function in our functions.php file, and we're going to be using our minimize theme for this.
Very cool.
Our responsive WordPress theme. So we're going to call this min_WP_enqueue _scripts. And I know it's a lot, but we want to namespace it, and the reason is you want it to be specific to that theme. You want to make sure there's no other function called min_WP_enqueue scripts. So that's why we're naming it that.
Very cool.
And that function is going to house the following. We're going to first register both of these scripts. And what does registering do? Well, it's an easy way and a safe way to register a script to be used with the enqueuing function that WordPress provides as well. So what's going to happen is we're going to register the script, and that function takes in a few parameters, and we have to put the correct values in there. So the handle, which is the first parameter, is basically just a name for a script. In this case, for the first script, we're going to enqueue the common script that comes with the Paintbrush library. And we're going to just call it Paintbrush-common. So we'll just call it Paintbrush-common. Then we're going to need to get the source, And in that case, we're going to use a function called getTemplateDirectoryURI, and we'll provide a link down below so you can learn a little bit more about that function.
Yeah, links abound below for you guys watching this.
Links everywhere. Anyway, so we're going to go ahead and use that function, and then we're going to append our actual script to that. So in this case, we created a folder called JS to house our PaintBrush library, and the file name is common.js.
Okay.
So we have to append that to the end of it. That will go ahead and get the correct path for the script. Then after that comes the dependency parameter.
Okay.
And basically that says, does this script depend on any other scripts to run correctly?
Okay.
In this case, the common script does not.
Okay.
But later on, when we include the PaintBrush library, we'll have to specify that. So we're going to set this to false because we don't have any dependencies.
Right.
Then comes the version.
Okay.
We want to go ahead and set a version, and this is appended to the end of the script source, and it just helps you kind of keep track of where you're at with versions on different scripts.
Sure.
I found out in my research that this is on version 0.3, so it probably isn't technically considered a release yet. Usually a release is 1.0.
1.0, yeah.
So we're going to put 0.3 in here as a value.
It's cool enough to be talked about, though.
Yeah, oh, definitely. Yeah, it's stable.
And full featured enough to be.
Yeah, and it's stable enough to be used on a live WordPress site. And then the last parameter, which we're going to set to false, is in footer. And basically this says, do we want to load this script in the footer rather than the head section? Okay. The reason we'd want to load it in the footer is to decrease our page load time. Okay. But we need to keep this in the head because it actually deals with rendering the page. Okay. So we need to load these before the page is actually rendered so the filters will be applied in a timely manner. Then we need to go ahead and register our second script. So it's the same exact function. I'll just run through the parameters here. For the handle, we're just going to call this one PaintBrush.js. Okay. So PaintBrush-js. The source, we're going to do the same exact thing we did in the other one, except we're going to go ahead and just link to the PaintBrush.js file instead of the common. Then we're going to say, for the dependencies, that this script does require that common library in order to function properly. Okay. What we need to do is pass in an array. Okay. And we're going to pass in an array with a string. That string is going to contain the name of our common library. Sure. So we called it paintbrush-common. We're going to put that in that array. Right, from before, And what that does is that says load the common library before we load this library. That way all the functions will be there and everything will be in place.
Right. So
we're going to append.
It doesn't exist, right? Yeah.
Yep, definitely. So we're going to append the same version, 0.3. And in this case, we're going to set the footer to false, in footer to false, because we need it to load in the head section as well. Now the scripts are registered safely, and we need to go ahead and enqueue them. Right. So there's a function called WP-enqueueScript. Yep. And we'll, again, provide a link down below. This is the safe method of enqueuing or adding scripts to a WordPress-generated page.
Specifically in WordPress-generated pages, yeah.
Yes. So this function includes a script if it hasn't already been included, and if it has, it just ignores it because we don't want to load it twice. And it safely handles all the dependencies if needed. Now, this script is this function is very easy to implement since we have already registered both of our scripts. What we're going to do now is we're just going to simply add our handle property. And in this case, we're going to enqueue our paintbrush.js script, and that will go ahead, since that script depends on the common library, it's going to load that script as well. So we just have to call this enqueue script once, and it's going to go ahead and load all the scripts for us. And then what we have to do here, getting down to the last part of actually getting this functionality working in WordPress, is we have to use a function called add action. Right. This function here allows you to hook a function onto a specific action. Okay. So in this example, what we're going to use is the action name WP enqueue scripts. Actually, that's the hook name. Sorry about that.
That's cool.
WP enqueue scripts. And what we're going to do, that's going to be the tag in this case. And then the function to add is going to be our function that we created before. min_WP_enqueue_scripts. All right. It's a little confusing. Sure. And then at this point, we're going to go ahead and save the file, upload it via FTP. Right. Test it out, make sure that the script is loaded. We'll view the source. We'll see that the script is there. Right. If not, we'll go back and check for any errors.
Right. And at this point, the script would be implemented into
any page on WordPress in the head section. Right. So the only thing left to do now is actually apply this to whatever images.
Whatever you're doing on your actual WordPress.
You'd like, yeah. And it doesn't just have to be an image. It can be an element with a background
Right.
image as well, which we found in our research.
Which is really cool.
Yeah. So what we want to do is simply navigate to the page or post editor,
Yeah.
and you want to go into HTML view.
Right.
Once you're in there, you want to find the image tag, IMG,
Yeah.
and you want to go ahead and add one of the supplied classes to
Right.
that tag. Once you do that, you can switch back to visual mode if you'd like and hit update post, and you're
There you
good to go. You either have a blurred image or desaturated or
Whatever you want.
or multiple. You can add multiple effects to one image as
Really,
well.
really
So,
cool. Really
yeah.
cool.
So.
All right. Well, that's an awesome look. We talked about the plugin. We talked about the actual implementation of the plugin on your WordPress website. If you guys have any more questions about exactly what we were talking about today for implementing it, you can leave a comment below either on our page or on our YouTube video here. Or just check out our website, http://slocumstudio.com. You can actually go to our blog at slocumstudio.com/blog to see more of this awesome content, as well as subscribe to us so you can just get it delivered right to your inbox at slocumstudio.com/subscribe. Thank you so much, Scott.
Thanks, Dan.